To live in this era where this is happening right in your face, this is happening right now, you can actually witness, history in the making. I think that's what's so compelling. It's making everyone question other sites around the world. It really is kind of like a revelation constantly when you go there and kind of see what's coming out of the ground. To me, this is what I call a super civilization, the world's first one. It's got red, white, and black pigment has been found on it. This could then suggest that the entire site had red, white, and black pigment on it, maybe other colors. There are other underground cities that have been found recently. Now we're talking, there could be up to 60 underground cities. Some people say there's up to 200. If it ever got uncovered, they wanted everyone to know, we can record the winter solstice, thank you very much. The people of Göbekli Tepe, who were starting to measure the Earth, I think after the end of the last ice age, they were going around the world, they were like wanting to survey the planet. They were marking different latitudes to take their readings to measure the Earth.
Yeah, Hugh, welcome back, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So you came on the show. We did a virtual conversation, and then a couple weeks ago, you're like, "Hey, I'm going to be in town. You want to meet in person and re-record?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah, man! We got to get you in the studio, see some faces. We can talk some more." So. Yeah, I feel like we just kind of scratched the surface the last time. There's a lot more to cover. You got a lot of good stuff that you're working on.
There's quite a bit of stuff, yeah, for sure. And yeah, to see these vases, as we call them in England, it's pretty impressive. I mean, and we're going to get into some of the similar, objects that have been found in southeast Turkey, where I've been focusing on. But yeah, no, we covered quite a bit of ground last time. But even since last time, I've been to Turkey once or twice, and it's still being excavated. There's still discoveries being made, and it really is kind of like a revelation constantly when you go there and kind of see what's coming out of the ground.
They haven't kicked you out yet?
Almost. Getting there. Close. We're that close.
Well, good. You're getting your last couple trips in, then we'll make them good ones. Well, good, man. Yeah. So what's new since the last time we talked?
Well, since we were over there in September, in southeast Turkey, I put it in context for people. We're talking about the sites of Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, newly kind of excavated site called Sayburç, and there's a few others starting to be excavated now, like Harbet Suvan, Sefir Tepe, and a few others. And these all date back to the end of the last ice age. So we're talking 11,600 years or thereabouts, going to about 10,500 years ago. So this is quite an epic timescale we're dealing with here. And we're seeing some beautiful artwork, beautiful stonework, advanced technology for its time, innovations, astronomical alignments, and everything else. But to me, this is what I call a super civilization, the world's first one. This is like outrageous what is coming out of the ground, and the innovations that have come out of there. And so when we were there last time in September, like for example, Sayburç is one of the sites, and it's basically west of Şanlıurfa, which is the main city, the main town. That's all kind of all the sites are almost based around, if you like. It's the ancient town of Edessa. And so it's like quite well known in biblical kind of chronology with Abraham, Nimrod, and so forth. But Sayburç, which is a few miles west of there, is remarkable. I mean, for a long time, it was built upon, a village was built upon it. And so most of the things were covered up. But now they've kind of actually recently removed the house that was covering this huge, beautiful rock-cut carved enclosure, which was famous for the guy holding his kind of part with the leopards around him and the bull and the auroch figure with another human figure like jumping, which is called a narrative scene. So now, I mean, I can show you this image here. This just shows you kind of what it looks like now. And so the whole house above it has been completely removed. And so before this, it was like indoors. And so this whole area has now been completely uncovered.
Is that the former next door neighbor?
That is they're going to be former next door neighbors when their house is getting knocked down, unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah. But they're all being moved to another area. Apparently, they're all being kind of compensated, so it's not all bad.
Okay.
But it's worth it. Just the archaeology is just unbelievable, and you can see the narrative scene here. All of this is carved out of bedrock.
Wow.
Everything,
Wow.
So it's like there are other enclosures where they have T-pillars. I mean, in fact, this has actually got T-pillars. If we look at this is a 3D scan I did of it quickly when I was there, and you can kind of get a sense of the shaping of it. And also one of the central T-pillars has now been exposed, which it's broken, but you can see it there. There's even a hole in the ground as well, which is very much like a kiva, like we find in Native American tradition, where the first people kind of came up from and things like this. And you can see the shaping here around the bench, or the kind of step or bench, whatever you want to call it. It's almost got spaces where people would sit, but we don't know if they were for sitting or things were placed there, or whether large blocks of stone and T-pillars were placed in some of the thinner ones. But if we spin around here, you can get a sense of it. And this is like 42 feet wide, basically. So, and I've managed to get some very interesting measurements out of this as well. Last time on the show, we looked at the geometry of it to get a sense of it. But now the measurements are really fascinating me, because I'm fascinated by ancient metrology, and like we found in Egypt, we found in the stone circles of Britain. But now it seems to be here as well. They were using very specific, very accurate measurements. I think that's one of the most compelling aspects of these sites.
I could look at that thing go around in circles all day.
It is. There's something beautiful about it, isn't it?
So cool.
It's like having a little drone just flying around to get it. So, yeah, we looked at the geometry last time, which features this kind of thing, possibly. Now, we're still trying to work out what it is. It could be an ellipse, but we don't know, because half of it's still not been excavated.
Okay.
As you can see here, you see that whole part on the left?
Got it.
So it's not been excavated. But what we were able to do was find the spot on the other side where the other edge of the enclosure was. Now that really, really impressed me, because what I was able to do was be able to measure it within this app, on the phone. You basically, when you scan the site, you can actually kind of take perfect measurements. So the width of it, the wide width of it, is 42 British feet. And the other angle going through it was exactly 36 British feet. And that kind of is interesting in its own right. So that makes it a 7:6 ratio, if you're looking at ratios. But the measurements, if you go into the old measurements, this is what blows my mind now. Not everybody is interested in ancient measurements, but I certainly am. So 42 feet equates to 40 Persian feet. And a Persian foot is 1.05 feet. And we've found that over and over again in Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, places like Stonehenge and other, even like in Egypt as well. It's part of a kind of tradition, an ancient canon of a breakdown of an earth measurement. So it's a subdivision of earth measures. So there's an understanding of the size and shape of the earth potentially in these sites. For example, a Persian foot, I think 1 English mile is 5,280 feet, something like that. But it's exactly 5,000 Persian feet, which is bizarre, but it is. And in Stonehenge, they found Mike Parker Pearson, the head archaeologist there. He did some research on that, and they found what is called the Longfoot, repeated quite frequently within Stonehenge. The Longfoot is the same as the Persian foot. It's 1.05 feet, or just over 1.05 feet. So we found that over and over again there. So we're finding it here as well. So the 42, the main width of it, which going left to right on that one, is 42 feet, which is 40 Persian feet. That's what it equates to. But the other, going from top to bottom across that way, we found the other edge of it, and that's 36 feet, British feet, which equates to 40 Assyrian feet, which is a slightly, shorter one than a foot. So we've got 40 Persian feet by 40 Assyrian feet in one structure. And both those lengths of foot, which are slightly different, but they're all perfectly harmonically connected with the British foot, are found at Göbekli Tepe and all the other sites. So both of these measurements are found at other sites. So it matches what we're finding across the region, that they had standard units of measure, but not just one unit. They were using multiple units, which are all harmonically connected to one another. This is the nature of the modern understanding of ancient metrology, based on the work of John Neal and John Michel. Also,
so what does that tell us? I mean, that tells us that there was some ancient system of measurement that all of these other, the Persian and all of these other systems of measurements kind of grew from. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, basically what it appears is that all these measurements are kind of mostly based on a subdivision of the size of the Earth or size of the degree of latitude and things like this. Like we saw 5,000 Persian feet is a English mile and things like this. It's quite, if you start looking into it in great detail, you find all these kind of strange coincidences that they seem to have an understanding of the size and shape of the Earth, even back here, back in this era. I know Graham Hancock, who you spoke to recently, he's like emphasizes that through the old maps.
Right.
You know, and longitude, they understood longitude and things like this. And so I think it's the same thing, but maybe it's much earlier than people realized, you know, that they were actually measuring the Earth in deep antiquity. And there's good evidence of that. I mean, it's not that big a deal. I mean, you can go and measure things. You can use shadows and poles and things like this at certain times of the day and year to get measurements. That's how they worked out the degree in Egypt, where they were, you know, setting up things at certain times of year so the sun would create certain angles, and they would repeat that all the way down to the other degree level and so forth. Also, you can use the stars and things like this. But I think what we're finding here is that these weren't arbitrary measurements. They weren't just random. They were using a system that they understood. And I believe they had probably a few different measurements, maybe 5 or 6, all, you know, different variations of the foot, and we find them over and over again at these sites. And so I am completely blown away that these measurements came out of this. You know, I mean, I need to do a little bit more research on this, double, triple check everything. But the fact that you're finding it is, you know, whole numbers as well. That's the key. You got to find whole number measurement. If you find 36.2, it doesn't really make much sense. Right.
So this whole part on the bottom is not excavated yet.
No, but they found the other edge of the enclosure.
Okay. And so are they going to excavate the rest of it then?
They are. Yeah, they're doing it now.
They're not going to plant trees on the top of the rest of it?
I hope not. But there are trees right next to it because this was a kind of, people were living here. You know, this was like, as you can see here, you got a tree there. But this is like a village.
Well, hopefully it's not an olive tree and they can get rid of it.
But you mentioned the trees. We can just talk about that for a moment because a Turkish news report or an interview came out recently, and they actually say they're going to remove some of the trees now. You know, this is what I heard. You know, I actually got sent a copy of it, a translation of it. They're going to remove some of the trees. They're going to excavate other parts of Göbekli Tepe. Huh. So I know you've been talking to Jimmy about this. Yeah, Jimmy Corsetti. And so thankfully, maybe he's kind of, you know, got them doing stuff. Good. So they claim they were going to do it anyway, but let's see. See. But so more, you know, there are gentle excavations being done at Göbekli Tepe, gradual, very slow. They're working on enclosure B, just at the moment. And also they're kind of tidying things up because it's all got a bit kind of messy there over the last, you know, just the sort of chaotic, because there's so much rubble. It's crazy.
Yeah. But back to here then. So can we go back to that first shot that you pulled up? Yeah. The overhead or the scan. So the 42 is from top to bottom here, or quickly becoming left to right here,
yes.
Right? And then the 36 is from the guy holding himself all the way straight across that hole in the middle, and then you found the other. They know where the other side of it is, so they know it's basically. Is it a circle? Is it an oval? It's a bit of an oval. I guess
it's a bit of an oval, but interestingly, if we just look at, hang on, let me just find the image. It can't be a perfect ellipse like this because it would be too short. You know, one side of it. It actually fits more closely to this. It's not. I don't think it's going to be this. You know, this is. I've actually got a wager on this with Andrew Collins. I'm convinced it's going to be this, which is a flattened circle type B, which you find in British stone circles. and he's convinced it's going to be that. Now, it's not going to be that for sure, because the top to bottom length is longer than that. It's closer to that, but it may be an extended kind of, obtuse, a little bit, out of shape.
42 by 36 is closer to a circle than an egg. So
yes,
this is.
So, but we'll see. We're going to wait and see. Hopefully, I'm going to earn 10 English pounds from my wager. So let's see how that unfolds.
Okay. What about those images on the wall then? Are anything crazy come out of there besides the dude?
Yeah, so either side of the dude, notice one of his hands is holding his phallus. Yep. This is you actually find this on numerous other statues in the area. He's got ribs showing and a kind of shoulder kind of bones showing. He looks like he's wearing some kind of hat, and he's kind of holding himself somehow. But he's got two leopards on either side of him coming towards him. The further left, you've got another human figure on the other side of the leopards, who looks like he's kind of dancing or jumping. He's holding some kind of bola or snake in his hand. And to the left of that, you have an auroch, quite a large bovine, basically, which were known to exist in this area. It's very similar to carvings you find at Göbekli Tepe as well. And so some people say it's a narrative scene. That's the official stance on it. It could be astronomical. It could represent Taurus. The man on the left could represent, Orion the hunter. The leopards could represent Leo. We don't know. There's lots of. It could be the Gemini. We don't know. There's lots of different interpretations of that right now. No one actually knows the correct. We're going to analyze it, myself and J.J. Ainsworth, in our next book. That's the plan. Andrew Collins believes it's like a representation of bull leaping, the first ever bull leaping ever. Because it actually looks like that, the way he's jumping. But we're not sure. It's still down to interpretation, which is one of the big issues in archaeology, really. Who gets to interpret things? Who's allowed to interpret it? Who's allowed to kind of put their opinions and research into it? And I think that's what's so fascinating about this area, because there's a huge amount of symbolism, huge amount that is coming out there. And now the work is on. The game is on. Who's going to interpret it first? Who's going to kind of get the actual information correct? When it comes down to knowing what they were trying to tell us.
So leopard and bull, basically, right?
In this one, yeah.
And is that? I mean, how can you be sure? I guess on the leopard specifically, like.
Yeah, that's a good question. For a long time, they thought they were often representations of lions. Like in Göbekli Tepe, for instance, we have the Lion Pillars building. That's an interesting part of the site for sure. And now I think they've actually changed the name to the Leopard Pillars building, because it is more likely to be leopards than it is any other kind of creature depicted there. And the leopards are found over and over again in Karahan Tepe. Okay. A lot, a huge amount there. So that kind of backs up the idea that they're probably leopards. And also they're known to exist, and they found leopard bones. It was known to exist in this area at this time.
Okay. Any other carvings on the walls?
There's quite a lot going on at Sayburch, actually. Like you've got this area here, which they think actually this is outside. So the house behind it, see that there, that is actually completely vanished now. This is before that, to give you a bit of context. So that house and all the buildings just behind this have gone. But this they think is actually a Roman quarry. And actually, this isn't part of the actual Taş Tepeler site. But you see where the circle is? Just there, you got this. This is about, 2.5 feet wide. And this is some kind of amoeba type carving. It's got some kind of mushroom-shaped or serpent-headed shape with all these dimples all around it. This is definitely Taş Tepeler era. This is definitely from that era. And the Romans left that there. They didn't disturb it. They didn't destroy it. They just worked next to it to get their stone, which is really interesting. So there is actually a case to be made that that area we saw that was like quarried could actually be ancient. It could actually be part of the ancient construction.
As opposed to Roman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But traditionally it's Roman, because there is a Roman settlement just near here.
Okay.
So they know Romans were here, Byzantines and so forth.
Okay.
And just behind over there on the right I don't have images here, but there's actually an underground area, like going 2 levels down, carved out of the bedrock, 2 rooms basically.
Really?
Yeah, with steps going down.
Huh. You got any pictures of that?
I don't know if I've got them here, but I can certainly.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's not huge. It's not much to look at, but they were carving into the bedrock, making underground areas, and we know that for a fact because most of the enclosures are carved down into the bedrock. So they definitely had the ability to work in the stone and leave beautiful 3D relief carvings, coming out of the stone. So they were master masons. They really were technically brilliant. And also we found a tunnel, like it goes about 120 feet, sloping at 45 degrees into the ground, not far in this general area, it's a few miles away from here, carved out of the bedrock, just next to one of the unexcavated Taş Tepeler sites. And that surprised us, but it's there. It's for real. And so there's all sorts going on here. I can provide a couple of photos of that for sure. And so there's much more to this culture than meets the eye. And it makes you question as well, like the underground cities of Derinkuyu.
I was just thinking that.
Further to the west. But also they found underground cities further to the east. Yeah, this is actually a tunnel at Çayanu, another site. This is another site. And so this is the pre-pottery Neolithic site of Çayanu, which is further north near Diyarbakir. And there's a tunnel there as well. And look how far it goes down. It goes down about what? It's called 40 Steps. That's the name of it. It goes down about 100 feet. And it is one that Andrew investigated. That's Andrew there, and myself, in 2004. And last time he went there was then. So we had to it took a while to find it. He couldn't remember where it was. So we found it, and there's another tunnel very similar to the one in near, in the general region of Sayburç and Göbekli Tepe that we investigated previously. So there's a whole sort of thing going on. Yeah. Some people question whether the ones here are that old, or whether they're just Byzantine or Roman wells and things like this. Some people have suggested they are, but it just seemed like the Taş Tepeler people could do it. And even at Derinkuyu, I mean, one of the interesting things about that, this is way over in Cappadocia, further to the west. This is, the first levels are the oldest in Derinkuyu, for instance. Yeah, they always are first levels, and they go down to get newer and newer. But the first levels are clearly not, there's no metal scraping on the walls to create them. This is like done with, harder stone or antler picks, things like this, and intricate stuff with obsidian. They found, there's actually a book that came out, and one of the archaeologists there found the river and the stream where they threw all the debris into it that they scraped out of there. And within that debris, he found Paleolithic and Mesolithic hand tools and scrapers going back past Taş Tepeler era, older than that, going back possibly 20,000 years, up to like 10,000 years ago. And that information just disappeared. But luckily, Andrew got a copy of the book years ago when he was there and got the data. And we've managed to find another copy when we were there last time, and I've got one at home now where it says that. And that's been ignored. I mean, that's not on, I don't think that's on Wikipedia anymore, for instance. They kind of removed that information. But so they are proven now, certainly the first level or two down, to go back very early era. And that's the same levels you've got at Sayburç. So it's quite impressive.
So how many years before present then would that put them?
Well,
given the tools?
Well, the ones at Derinkuyu, possibly, I don't think they give exact dates, but they go into the Paleolithic. So we're going anywhere between the Taş Tepeler era of 12,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, all the way back to possibly 20,000, something like this. But it's quite interesting that there's some evidence for very early work carving into stone and creating caves, not just using natural caves that are there. But the one at Çayanu, which we just looked at, that looks like it was partly natural, and then they kind of carved the steps down into it and possibly used it as a well. But I think these were used for more possibly ceremonial purposes, and also to observe, the movement of the heavens above, looking out.
Not the tunnels, but the
tunnels, yeah.
The tunnels? Oh, okay. I see. Okay.
Because they're like a perfect kind of window to observe through. And I think that's what the enclosures and the hold stones that we find at like Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe were partly used for as well. They were used to, you sit in one spot on one of those nice benches that probably had, nice animal furs on it and things like that. You sit in one spot, the kind of priestly kind of shaman dude or woman, whoever, would be looking out and like watch the stars or the sunrise and things happen, for that period of time, for whatever they were specifically looking at. And I think that's heavily overlooked in the Taş Tepeler region, the astronomy.
And so your thought would be more ritualistic, ceremonial, as opposed to they had to dig because of something that changed, some catastrophe or something that the climate changed, that they had to go underground. I mean, any speculation on that, the potential for that to be why these were dug?
Yes, there has been discussions about this, about why you would have these underground cities. Now, remember that the first levels, the first earliest phase would have been just 1 or 2 levels. So that wouldn't have been a huge amount of people could go in there, especially at a place like Derinkuyu. Just a reminder, there are other underground cities that have been found recently. Now we're talking, there could be up to 60 underground cities. Some people say there's up to 200.
Wow.
Yeah. So
just in Turkey?
In Turkey. Yeah, they found some in Midyat, which is further east from Şanlıurfa, which is, almost towards, it's going right into the heart of the Taş Tepeler region. It's in between the Tigris River and the Euphrates, between, where most of these Taş Tepeler sites are. And you can go in there. They're going to open it up to the public soon. There's another one called something like 40 Eyes or something like that, which is located near Asikli Hoyak, which is another later Taş Tepeler site, which is like more related to Çatalhöyük than it is. Here we go. Here's one of them here. And so they're not just in Cappadocia. They're all over South Turkey, Southeast Turkey, stretching all the way out to the east.
When were these found?
The one in Midyat was relatively just a few years ago.
Okay.
And there's one in Konya as well. And then there's one near Asikli Hoyak as well. And Konya is near Çatalhöyük, which is the, 7,500 BC city, basically. One of the first places where there was a proper ancient city in that part of the world. That was the main site in Turkey, before Göbekli Tepe was discovered. That was found back in the 50s, 60s kind of thing. So there's a huge amount, to consider.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't realize for a long time, Turkey wasn't the most interesting place to go for a lot of people. Now it's the most interesting. It's like rewriting history just by what's being discovered. And the fact that many of these were buried as well, the sites like Göbekli Tepe and so forth, is interesting. Why they would close down these sites rather than kind of leave them open. But in a way that preserved them, that enabled the discoveries now to be so pristine.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, so speculation then just on all the underground cities that are being found then, like in terms of when do you think they were? Because you can't date them, right? Are they able to find organic material and date any of those yet, or is it?
Well, people have lived in them constantly. That's the problem.
Right.
Yeah. There's no breaks.
Yeah.
People use them. I mean, they're there. They're going to use them.
Yeah.
And so, luckily, I think when finding the debris, when the archaeologists found the debris, that was the key to kind of unlocking it. But then you can see by the types of tools that are used on making them. You can see the tool marks on the walls, whether they're metal, which would be later, Hittite era, or whether they would be, more Paleolithic or Mesolithic or pre-pottery Neolithic tools. So that's the best way to date them, I think. But I think some information is going to be coming out soon. I think they're doing research on the one at Midyat and the one in Konya. So let's see what happens.
Good. Yeah, it feels like Derinkuyu was kind of lumped into that whole nothing before 2500 BC kind of category, and so it was just kind of put in there with everything else. So we didn't know how to dig a hole before that, so it must be that old. But now with all these Taş Tepeler sites being uncovered, it's like, well, maybe we can have a little bit more open minds about how old some of these underground sites might be.
Yes, true. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and you mentioned also, I forgot to mention. You asked about what they were used for. Now, there is a debate whether they were built before the end of the kind of Ice Age and they were actually used to protect themselves from airbursts and impact events. We know, like down south in Syria, at one of the sites there, there's an airburst was recorded at, I think, Tel Harura or something, and that is really intriguing. I mean, I know several people have written about this. This is part of the Younger Dryas kind of hypothesis theory, because there was actual airburst evidence of them found at an actual site just a couple of 100 kilometers from Göbekli Tepe. And so if that was happening, you could understand, in that general area, why people might want to go underground. That's going to kill a whole bunch of people.
As a reaction to that event.
Yeah, or maybe it was just happening, I think, with the Younger Dryas. I mean, I'm not an expert on the Younger Dryas, but I'm aware of the whole story of it, that it seems like it went on for quite a while. And so people would probably go, right, let's get protected here. And so now that makes sense, with that discovery there, that they found all these particles which proved there was some kind of multiple airburst that lasted for I think several hours. That's what they say, and so it would have actually, and it caused massive destruction, because it was so close to the Earth. And so it wasn't actually an impact, but it was the airburst. But weirdly, at this site, they then, after that had all happened and they got themselves together, they carried on that same settlement, carried on building there and working the land and developing agriculture in that area. So, they did carry on afterwards as well. But yeah, so it makes sense that maybe these pockets of underground areas may have been, if anything bad was happening, they could actually go there and hide out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd always kind of assumed it was due to whatever climate change was happening during the Younger Dryas, that all of a sudden, it seems like everyone went into caves, and South America was doing cave arts. People went underground during Cuyu, people, starting to... So that was always kind of my assumption that however the climate change during that time period forced people to go underground, whether it was too much solar radiation or just whatever it might have been. But the airburst thing is pretty interesting.
That is pretty interesting. I mean, there's another one. Yeah, here we go. This is one of the sites that I think was affected. Yeah, in fact, George Howard's mentioned on there, and this is very, very interesting. I mean, you've also got there's other theories as well. The Younger Dryas isn't the only theory. Some people say it's solar outbursts kind of causing horrific effects, that the magnetic field was badly affected around this time, and it would actually reduce to such a low level that the radiation would be extremely harmful and things like this. So there's different theories now. It's not just like one fixed thing, and different effects of the Younger Dryas as well, different areas, some with direct impacts, some with airbursts and things like this. So yeah, it would make sense that you want to have a decent roof or umbrella.
Right. Have the ability to at least hide. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why billionaires are making bunkers today, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Just in case. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that first site that I can never pronounce that you pulled up on your computer, can we take a look at that one more time?
Which one was that? Sayburch, yeah, for sure. Let me just find that. That is one of the most interesting ones. In fact, here's an image. Let me just play this. This is actually before. This is a scan I did before the roof was, before the house was taken away. So you can see it's like inside, it's in the interior here. And also the name of it, I've got to mention the name of this. I think I mentioned this last time, but this always gets me. And this to me is like a big yay to the whole idea of these were astronomical sites. Because say translates to counting, birch translates to sign of the zodiac or horoscope, and in Kurdish, birch means tower or watchtower. Now, there's good evidence, and we talked to the locals about this, that there was originally a tower, like a stone tower, in the Sayburg village, going back to, 70 to 100 years ago. And the stones were sold by the local mayor to get some funding for the village so people could use it for building. So that this tower could have been one, like we see at Jericho. It could have been one like you see at Tel Karamal down in Syria, where there were known structural towers there. And so there may have been one here, and it may be recorded in the name of the site. which I think is really interesting. It's more likely this was an astronomical site. This was like where they were taking observations from. This particular enclosure is at the very top of the hill, and it would have been a perfect place to watch the horizon from. And so I believe that there's something in that. This just shows you.
Is that the house? The wall behind it, right there. That would have been, or is that a? That's
that's still that was. This was when it was still buried. So not buried. This is when the house was still on top of it, and that was one of the walls. Yeah,
that's one of the walls of the house.
Yeah, so they kind of completely removed that away.
And the thing on the guy's head, is there a closer up image of that guy's face or head to see what he's wearing?
Yeah, I mean it looks like almost like some kind of hat. Yeah, but it looks like some kind of flat area. But what's above it, I think, is particularly interesting. Which we can see kind of, you can see, I can't really see it in that one. I'll have to open up the other one again.
There we go.
But there you go. So it's got the eyes carved. It's got like a kind of cut mark above the head. And it's got a V-neck, which is a tradition we find at Karahan Tepe, also at, Earth Man or Beall statue.
Bringing back the 90s.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, it's very Star Trek as well. So we've got that to consider as well. So there's quite a few different things going on at these sites. I mean, not a huge amount has been discovered in this dig season, but they're extending the dig this year because they've got this big congress coming up in Shanlurfa in November, which is one of the, we're not going to be going to it, but that's a lot of the new data is going to be presented there, which should be quite interesting. So hopefully they're cracking into it, and we're going to see some new stuff come out in the next couple of months.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Any stone bowls or plates found at the site?
There are a few at Karahan Tepe, yeah, for sure. There's some at Karahan Tepe. There's a few come out of Göbekli Tepe. There's a few that have come out of Ayaan Hoyak as well. I'll just bring up a couple of images here. I think I've got them somewhere. These are the ones that are in the museum. So These are actually in Shanlurfa Museum. Sorry about that. I've got them here eventually. And these are quite big. Some of them are 3 feet wide. Some are made of basalt. Some of limestone. There's different types of stone. What's interesting about this is that there are lots of different types of stone being used, and to me it feels like these were being brought in from other areas as part of the ceremony, part of the kind of ritual year, which I believe they were carrying out different things at different times of year. That's why they were so obsessed with marking the winter solstice and different astronomical events. We can see some of the detail on one of the edges of one here. These were found mostly, the ones here anyway, were found mostly on the benches in between the T-pillars at Karahan Tepe. Now, some have been found at Göbekli Tepe. There's a few on display. But the ones at Karahan Tepe, there's like dozens of them, possibly hundreds of them.
Wow.
And then a new cache was found recently here. This is, it's not my photo, but this is in an area of Karahan Tepe that's been recently excavated, and they call it the kitchen. This is like the kind of name they've given to it, because this is where it extends further than this. This is an area where they believe they were preparing food for the kind of people at the site. And there's also a hearth there where they were heating things up. The weird thing is they found animal bones here, but one of the things that they definitely found here was a whole series of Anatolian viper skeletons, like snake skeletons. And I'm like, did they eat snakes?
They're doing drugs.
Yeah, this is more likely, yeah. This is what I'm thinking. I mean, this could have been an alchemical kitchen. That's what we're calling it. Me and Andrew and our friend Debbie, we just decided to call it the alchemical kitchen. It's a much more cool name, And because you're finding Anatolian viper bones, you can take the venom from the Anatolian viper and create a powerful, quite dangerous psychotropic. Right. And there's also symbolism here of mushrooms all over the site. We have potentially other things they were using. This could have been where they brewed some of the beer, because calcium oxalate was found in some of the vats, the large containers at Göbekli Tepe. And that could have had ergot growing on it. There could be all sorts of things they were into back then. But some of these vessels, I mean, you can see some here. They're very, very large. Some are 2 or 3 feet wide. Some of the bowls at the back, this is all stone. None of this is ceramic. This was pre-pottery Neolithic era, before they were making pottery. So this is all probably 11,400 to like 10,200, years ago. And so that's quite impressive. I mean, in its own right, that's quite impressive. Even if it's limestone, it's still quite cool.
Right.
They're still doing, but some of it's basalt, some of it's granite, some of it's tough stone.
That's incredible. And they're perfectly round.
Some of them are really, really accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got like...
I mean, maybe not perfectly, but round enough that this wasn't chiseled away with a hand tool, right?
I mean, some of these are very much polished. You can see that here. I mean, especially on the dark one in the middle there. You see like the way that there's almost like an indentation, like a cut mark. It's almost like smoothed into it. So some people have said that's because of grinding, but that looks like polishing to me. When you get up close and have a look at that, that is like polishing. That isn't just, grinding some, grains and seeds in there. That'd be a bit rougher, a bit more kind of non in the middle, So so this is kind of intriguing. And then you've got this shaping around the edge. Now you can see it's not, precise on this one in particular, but it's still pretty good. I mean, 12,000-year-old, nearly 12,000-year-old. So you got these ones here, but there's a couple of other ones they found. And
I mean, those were turned, right? They would have had to have been turned on some sort of a lathe, right? I mean, or some sort of a turning device. I mean, it's not a potter's wheel because it's not pottery, and it's not that's a very, very round objects, right?
Yes, they are. There's a lot of accuracy going on here, and especially when you start looking, when I've started looking into the geometry and the measurements of everything, there's a lot of accurate, a lot of detailed, focused creation here. It's not random. This isn't just some kind of random event. These are kind of there's a legacy of this building up to this as well.
None with handles, it doesn't look like.
Not that I'm aware of, but some have beautiful carvings on. There's some found at sites like Jan Lahoyak and a few in Göbekli Tepe, which is even older than this, which have got beautiful carvings, all made of stone as well.
But even that one by the red bucket on the ground, the round one, it looks like it has a depression in it, similar to that.
Yes.
Similar to that plate that we saw in the other image. So that was functional. They were using that middle part of the plate for something.
But it makes me question, if this was a kitchen, I mean, would they use plates like this for food, or would they make them out of wood, or would they make them out of something else? I mean, because they had lime mortar, they had terrazzo, which is like which would heat up to 850 degrees limestone to get the kind of lime plaster. So they could have made things out of that if they wanted to. Why do they want to create these giant stone plates? Were they for food? Was it like a fruit bowl? What was it? Then we got these little devices as well, these little things that were found. The top right one there is interesting. That's limestone. But around you can see it's got like
same depression.
Yeah, another depression in it. But around the edge, you see it's got that kind of edging around it. That's actually got chevrons all around it. Really nicely shaped chevrons all the way around it, perfectly. You can just about see it on there on the top right. You got like on the top left, you got like a shaft straightener. It's what they call it. And the symbol on it is really interesting. That's the same symbol we find at Göbekli Tepe, which is an earlier site hundreds of miles away along the Tigris River.
A shaft straightener.
That's what they call it, yeah.
So for like straightening a stick or something?
I guess so, yeah. For like, weapons,
spears,
things like spears.
Canes or whatever, yeah.
On the bottom left, you've got this tiny little kind of frog or toad. It's like less than an inch wide. Beautifully carved out of, and they found serpentine, they found nephrite, they found crystal, objects from Göbekli Tepe.
Wow.
So it's pretty, they were working with very hard stone, and they were up for it. They were into it. They were like experimenting, and you could see that. I mean, you can see this kind of abstract, artistic kind of way of thought, which dominated this culture, which really began with Göbekli Tepe, really kicked off at Göbekli Tepe. Although you could see some sites building up to it. And the thing I like about it is that the style spec didn't change. until the end of the culture, like 1,500 to 2,000 years later. So it was the same. They came up with the design for everything, stuck with it. It's a bit like Egypt, you know. It's a bit like Mayan style, you know. You get that they stick with the same system, the same style, and it just didn't fluctuate. It's really bizarre, you know. There's variations in it, artistic variations, but you know, not that much. You know, just changed a little bit. Yeah.
The one thing that I don't understand is if it was intentionally buried, why would you leave all the plates and the beautiful stone carved objects in the bottom of it just to be buried by a bunch of dirt and cracked by the pressure of the earth? A lot of these plates, like why not take that stuff out? If it really was intentionally buried, why not remove that stuff first?
I know. It's interesting because the plates themselves are very much. A lot of them were found placed on the benches between the T-pillars, broken mostly, some not broken, but they were clearly just before they buried it, and they know they buried Karahan Tepe. They know it was deliberately buried. It's been proven by the head archaeologist there. He's done a paper on it. Well, like Göbekli Tepe, there's debates now because there's a slope slide hypothesis which has now come in, but at Karahan Tepe, so what they did, they must have like ceremonially kind of broken some of the plates, placed them on the benches in between the T-pillars, and then covered it over.
How was it proven? How was it proven that it was intentional?
The analysis done by the head excavator, Neshmi Karal, he's the head archaeologist there. When they were digging it, they noticed all the different layers, and they tested all the different layers, especially in the structure AB, or the pillar shrine, where you have the kind of the head coming out the side, all the pillars. The one that's got the winter solstice alignment in it. So that was the main, but then he realised through the layers of the main enclosure, they very methodically went down and checked. They realised it wasn't, you know, accidentally sloping in, you know, sliding in. This was an actual deliberate fill.
But what was it about the layers? Were all the layers the same from
different? No, there were different materials actually. I think I've got an image of it here somewhere. But there was actually different materials going down into the structure itself. But he found all these different materials, like different mud, you know, different layers of stone, even certain types of pebbles, some coming in from not the local area. Then at the very top, well, this is all in the pillar shrine or structure AB, he found these, then there was large kind of slabs to cover it over completely. And so that particular area, the pillar shrine, structure AB, that was very carefully covered up and closed down, and almost, so they wanted to keep it in the perfect condition for some reason, which I believe I know the reason. Whereas the rest of the site, they deliberately broke and pushed over the T-pillars, broke the plates, broke the statues in 3 places, and then buried it. But left everything in place and placed everything where they wanted it, then buried it. Whereas the pillar shrine was very much preserved. The reason they would do that, and I believe we've got a very good case for that, is because of the winter solstice sunrise alignment. It would have made sense for that. I mean, we've got an image of the pillar shrine here. It's just another scan, and this was filled in completely. And this is all. Remember, this is mostly bedrock. Yeah, so if you want to preserve something, you bury it as it is. So they preserved it really well. That's actually looking through the hole towards the head, which is huge. And you know, and we completely believe, me and J.J. Ainsworth, and even Andrew's got our back on this as well, is that they wanted that if it ever got uncovered, they wanted everyone to know, hey, we can record the winter solstice. Thank you very much. We're quite good at this. And they were doing it. And so luckily they did. It's all in bedrock, so you can't move anything. Nothing can be shuffled around or to get in the way. It's all there, fixed. And so I think that's why they preserved this particular enclosure so carefully, because they wanted to preserve this alignment that comes through, and you know, you can witness it yourself if you go there today. Amazingly, this is what you see when you kind of look at it, basically. over a 45-minute period. So to me, that's fascinating, and it also gives a reason why it was buried. And I think that's one of the most valid reasons. Otherwise, why wouldn't they damage this area? Why wouldn't they break the pillars like they did in the rest of the site? Why leave this one in really good condition? And so that I think is compelling, to say the least. Yeah.
Going back to the hole in the ground at the is that where you're saying the tower may have come out of, or
no?
Okay.
No, the tower was further down, further north in the village somewhere. Now, there's lots of stonework all through the village. Because we know there were Romans nearby, Byzantines, and there could be some of the tower could have been used to build the village itself. But no, that hole there is unusual, though.
Yeah, what is it? What's the deal with the hole?
Well, that is a strange thing, because there's not many sites that have that, although there are kind of shallow holes at Göbekli Tepe, which have been covered up with slabs, but not too much. In fact, I've got an image of that here. I can find that in a moment. But that is, there's different ideas. Some people say it was a relatively modern carving, and they were using it for some reason. Who knows? It doesn't go down. It goes down about maybe 5 feet. But if you go into the underground chamber, just to that side of this enclosure, and you go deep in the ground, in that, further over that side, you look up in the ceiling, and there's a hole carved out 20 feet up to the surface. Not this one, but another one. Yeah. And so it's like, what the hell? So was that just for light? Is there something under this that may have once connected to? Mm-hmm. There is that possibility as well. There could be a whole underground area here. That's a whole thing. If that ever gets excavated or it gets discovered, we don't know. But if you look at the traditions of, because this is very much, a lot of people say this is like a kiva, like a Native American kiva. It's like a sacred ceremonial space that you find at Chaco Canyon and places like this. And they often have holes in them. I think actually Graham mentioned this in the recent episodes of Ancient Apocalypse. He pointed out that in Chaco Canyon, that, and that's where the kind of people emerged from, where the gods came up, or the people came up from like the underworld into this world. And so you get the same symbolism here, but it may have a completely different meaning to them. We just don't know. But it's interesting that it's very similar to a sunken, like kivas are often sunken down, a few feet into the bedrock, then they build around it. And so that's intriguing, yeah.
Yeah, but at the bottom of that hole is bedrock as opposed to dirt?
Well, you can't really go down it. I certainly couldn't fit down it, but it just stops about 4 or 5 feet down. And I don't know if that's just filled in, or if maybe it's just got rubble built up in it. We don't know.
It'd be pretty interesting.
It would be pretty interesting, yeah.
Put a high-powered pressure hose or something to try to see if it really goes down deeper.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if the underground areas next door connect to it somehow. It would make sense. Yeah.
What do you think this whole 36 by 42 inch oval circle thing, what do you expect to find when they take all the rubble off the other side of it? Do you think it's just flat out carved flat bedrock, or do you think there's going to be, what's your wildest speculation?
So there's a whole couple of areas. So over on the left, you've got the broken kind of circle on the left. That's where we were just looking at. That's the area of the main enclosure. On the right, this is the whole new excavation area. So there's a huge amount being uncovered, and you can see there's an entire village built on top of it. Now, unfortunately, most of this is going to be gone. They're going to get rid of this.
What do you mean?
Well, they're going to demolish it. They've already started.
The homes.
Yeah. So we're talking to the locals actually, and we may, if it's appropriate, if we have a chat with them about it. We think they're getting funded and properly paid for it and everything. But if they're not, we might set up a crowdfunding thing and just help them out a bit, because we could easily raise some money for them, because it's annoying. You got generations of families living in one spot. They happen to build it on a Taş Tepeler site, and now they're getting kind of...
Are any of those homes for sale?
That's a good point.
I mean, I'd be happy to buy one of those homes and start digging.
Okay, I'll put that to them. We'll put in an offer. Yeah.
It's totally serious.
I know you are for some reason. Yeah.
But you're saying the government's got control of this, and they're going to start bulldozing it and excavating the whole thing.
I think once they discover archaeology there, it becomes,
Yeah.
Even though there's grey area over who owns it, because technically they still own it. I think the people who own the land, but they kind of allow the government to do things and they fund it so that they become the owners. It becomes a military zone as well, like I think at Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe. It officially becomes military kind of to protect it, I think, mainly. So I don't know what's happening here because the problem is people own all the land here, lots of different people. So I can find out.
Yeah.
I will make inquiries.
Yeah.
You can have a little kind of, Matt Beall house, Matt Beall house there.
Yeah, right. I mean, it would be pretty cool to get to the bottom of some of these things. I think we could probably get it done safer and faster,
And here we have this is the area that's been excavated, the southern area, I think. And so a bunch of stuff's coming out of the ground. I mean, you can see that it's all buried, deliberately probably. There's our group there having a little scoot round, earlier this year. And this is interesting. This is like a huge U-shaped stone. We went there on the left, bottom left there. We went there 1 week last September. And then a few days later, we turn up and they've excavated the whole thing. And this is interesting because at the bottom right of it, you actually have a little kind of perforation cut through the stone. It's just behind the camera there, but there's a perforation cut right through it, as though some kind of rope was tied to it. Now, this is traditionally what's called a dromos stone. This is like a kind of entrance stone into enclosures, and we know that because Klaus Schmidt uncovered one, or two of them really, evidence of two of them at Göbekli Tepe, leading one into enclosure C, another one I think into enclosure B or A. And so these are big, these are like 6 feet wide, and they got little designs on top. On the one at Göbekli Tepe has all these little critters, animals, and it's almost like you go it's like a liminal, it's like crossing over the boundary into a liminal space from the mundane to the sacred. This is like, and he called them dromos because that's the name given really in Greek tradition, where the entrance is to the temples there, going back 500 BC or so in certain parts of Greece, like Delphi and other places, and even Minoan and Mycenaean sites as well. And so that was quite interesting to sort of note that discoveries like that are being made actually at Sayburch itself. And there's quite a few things coming out. There's even human remains have also been found. This is a whole cache of bones, disarticulated as well. They're all broken up to about 14 individuals, they think, in one area. We got this photo ourselves last September, but we couldn't really publish it until they published the
Right.
So that's the thing I think that annoys the archaeologists over there. I mean, we're very respectful.
Yeah.
We're not going to do anything illegal or anything like that. We'll go there, we'll have a look around, we'll get photos, get footage, but we won't publish it if they don't publish it first sometimes, just because of, especially when it comes to human remains.
Right.
Especially.
Are you sitting on any crazy photos now that haven't been published?
I've got a couple.
Yeah.
I've got a couple.
What category would they fall into?
The underground area, we've known about that for a couple of years, so I'll provide a couple of photos of that for sure.
Yeah.
But I couldn't put it in my lecture really. But I mean, it's very interesting in Turkey because they're making discoveries now. It's happening.
Right.
All constantly. There's lots of new things coming out, little things, little discoveries here, there, and everywhere, and we just want to tell everyone about it, but sometimes you're not really supposed to. So we have to kind of find that balance. We don't want to upset anybody, but they're doing good work there. I mean, I know they're very slow at Göbekli Tepe, but they now look like they're up in the pace after a bit of pressure. Karahan Tepe, they're going for it. So they are at Sayburch as well. They're also working currently at a site called Sefer Tepe, which is nearer to Karahan Tepe, down in the southeast area of that region. They're working at a site called Harbet Zuvan Tepesi, which again is further in that area of the Tek Mountains. They're not started really on Ayan Lahoyek yet. They're not started on Kurt Tepe. We tried to find Tasli Tepe, which is one of the sites, the most northerly one of these sites, really. Nothing left there, really. It's still buried. But we did find a broken T-pillar in the village, just lying around, which was originally reported by Bahattin Selik, one of the early archaeologists, like 15 years ago. And it's still there, broken, lying around in the village walls, which surprised us. But it's there. And so there's still stuff to be done. You know, you can see why they're doing their best, you know, I think. But Göbekli Tepe is like a big tourist site now. There's big money involved. They're getting funded by all these different people. I know Jimmy's talked about this. Whereas the other sites are kind of a bit more low-key, and they're just cracking on with it. There's no one really talking about them too much. So I think we're going to see a lot of very interesting stuff coming out of the ground. I mean, this is the whole region here. I mean, this is the Jan Lahoyak, actually. This is very interesting. So this is yet to be excavated. But this is the whole region here, so you can get a sense of what we're looking at.
And that's only what we found.
Yeah, I mean, this is like 12 or so sites.
Yeah.
But now they're saying there's 38 sites, definitely. You know, we know a bunch of them. We've checked out some of them. But some of them, there's not much there. They're very small sites. Some of them are satellite sites. Some, they're not going to find T-pillars. Like, they haven't found any T-pillars. Çakmak Tepe, that's actually older than Göbekli Tepe. They haven't found any at Göbekli Tepe either. But they are finding them at most of the other ones. And they are going to find a lot more. In fact, we found a T-pillar at Jan Lahoyak. Here's some plates as well from Jan Lahoyak that we were shown by the local people.
Wow.
Yeah, and some artifacts.
Wow.
So on the left there's actually a part of a broken T-pillar just lying in a field. And I mean, it's battered. It's been like ploughed over, I think. But there is a T-pillar there, and like no one's
too heavy for no one's interested. To
steal. Joking aside, we would never.
I know.
I wouldn't even take it.
I'm surprised somebody hasn't, though.
It's big and it's battered. And they must know about it. We put it in our videos and mention it in the book. But yeah, I mean, this is going to be big news in the next 5 years.
Okay.
Watch that name, Jan Lahoyak. That's going to go big. And the fact is, you know, we got chatting with the locals. We met with the local mayor of the town, and he showed us all these artifacts. And we were like, whoa, really? And there's broken plates there made of stone and other pieces.
It's almost like a core drill, right? On that round.
The one at the back, I think it might be a fossil of some sort. The one at the far back on the right.
The second one up from the bottom middle. It's like a round.
Could be.
It's like Petrie's Core 7, except a little bigger and, you know,
I do have close-ups of these, of each one, so I can send you them. I've actually got scans of a couple of them as well.
Perfect, yeah.
I can happily send you them for your research as well. I think that would be interesting.
Yeah.
But I think you got to accept that there's a lot of strange stuff still going to be coming out of the ground. I mean, talking about these artifacts, we were looking at some. So we were looking at these, weren't we? We were looking at these, and we were looking at these. But I think what's of interest is that there are older sites going further south into Syria, going into Israel, Lebanon, Jordan. You know, the Natufian culture, which goes back to 14,500 years ago. And some of the stuff coming out of there, not only are we talking about geometries, you know, within the structures they built, they have stonework, carvings, and everything else, but they have things like this. And this is like 2.5 to 3 feet tall, carved out of solid basalt, I think. And this is just on display at the museum in, I think, Jerusalem.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've got a scan of this one as well.
Unbelievable. I mean, the perfect roundness. I mean, I'm sure it's not perfect, but that's incredible.
I mean, that's it from above.
Wow.
And there's several of these. This isn't just one of them.
14,500 years old-ish?
This one, I believe, it's around that. I mean, I don't have the data with me, but they go from 14,500 up to the pre-pottery Neolithic.
Which was?
12,500 years ago.
Okay.
So 11,500 years ago. So there's a whole era, very, pre-Göbekli Tepe cultures making these. I think
right in the Ice Age, they're making stuff like this in Turkey.
Well, this is this would be in Israel,
And okay.
going down into Israel and Syria.
Okay.
There's a few glitches in my scan, so it is pretty much perfectly shaped.
That bump on the outside is a glitch in the scan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just the shadows and everything.
Yep.
So there's no actual bump there.
Got it.
It's pretty much. You got a little kind of indentation. That's a weird little part. It's like a little circle with little indentations, like a little style on it.
It looks more like limestone than
It could be limestone.
This one for me.
To be honest with you, I don't have the information in front of me here, but this is
Either way, it's amazing.
It's pretty cool. But I think some of them are basalt though.
Yeah.
Some are definitely basalt. And that's just a photo of it. Look at that little indentation, that little circle in the middle there, at the bottom, in the middle. It's like got little indentations and a kind of curve on it. So that could have been just like, doodling. But yeah, nonetheless, It's very, very interesting.
But no turning device until 12,000 years after this is the the story.
Exactly. Yeah, but yeah, so the Natufians are very interesting people. I mean, I've been writing about them for the forthcoming book, and the more I look into them, the more blown away I am, because these are clearly one of the strong influences of the Taş Tepeler culture. They clearly went further north, and I think they were definitely involved in a site called Göbekli Tepe. I mean, there's stuff there which is just Natufian. I mean, it really is. Although officially they went no further than central kind of northern Syria, but clearly they were influenced, because some of their structures as well, which we find all along the Euphrates, further south than obviously Göbekli Tepe, we find geometry and possible standard units of measure. Now, I'm not going to go into that too much now, but they're there. And this is actually the work of Avi Gopher, who worked on the geometry, the equilateral triangle of Göbekli Tepe, and found interesting things there at Göbekli Tepe. But that he's found certain structural kind of geometry principles at play going back 14,000 years. And it's like, these people were really quite smart. They're the same size brain as us, really, in reality. So they just probably were utilizing it in the way they knew and what they thought best. And here's some other pieces. These are actually from a site called Ainan. These go back to 12,500 BC, so 14,500 years ago. So these are actually that old.
Wow.
Now these are a bit more rough hewn, but still, they're carving these out of stone.
Yeah.
Long before Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe.
Right.
Fascinating. I mean, and so there is, but there are different influences though when it comes to the Taş Tepeler culture. You got from the south. You got the Natufians. That's pretty solid in my opinion. You've got coming in from the west. You got really the Anatolian or even possibly European kind of influence. Even from Cyprus, they've now found these 12,000 or over 12,000 year old boat evidence going between the mainland of Turkey and Syria and Cyprus. So they were navigating before Göbekli Tepe. And that is interesting to me. And Cyprus is a whole other thing that needs to be looked at, I think. I'm going to start looking into that soon.
I don't think I've seen that. So Ice Age, end of the Ice Age, they're navigating on boats.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Wow.
Before that, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Graham has mentioned that in his recent article as well, on his website. And also we have influences coming in from the north. It's something that Andrew Collins is very much focused on. They found evidence of microblade technology that goes back 30,000 years coming in from the Russian steppes, Siberia originally coming down, sort of migrating downwards into the area. You have, again, this is Andrew, and also Klaus Schmidt spoke about this. They found these what are called Helwan points, certain points that were found. Helwan is in Egypt. So there's pre-pottery Neolithic activity in Egypt. We know we've got the site of Toshka, I think it's called, where there's some photos which look like there's some of these vases in the burials there, which is fascinating. Ben was showing me this, Ben Van Kerkwick. So there are connections all over that region. And this is why I think this is the super civilization. This culture was much more widespread than just that region in southeast Turkey. I think it stretched quite a bit further wider, and they were using boats. And then we can.
And so, what time period? So you're talking like 12,000 BC to like 15,000 BC. I mean, years ago, 12,000 years ago to 15,000 years ago ish, and that.
Yeah, some of them. Yeah,
that would have been this super civilization that you're talking about. That would have spanned.
Well, I think it really kicked off. With Göbekli Tepe, 9,600 BC, just after the end of the last ice age. That's when it really took off. That's when it became what I call this kind of master, this high culture, this super civilization, whatever you want to call it. Now, people debated me on the name, but I like that name, super civilization, because I think it's much bigger than Taş Tepeler region. It goes vastly wider than that. And it would be the first one on the planet at the time, that is known about at least. And now we know that there's possible earlier Ice Age civilizations that Graham's talks about, other people have talked about. But I think we have to kind of, keep that in mind, that this was a very sophisticated people. I've actually got something I just want to show you, because there's another site which comes a little bit later than this, which is called Atlit Yam. Now, this is a very interesting place. This is off the coast of Israel. Now, a whole series of pre-pottery Neolithic sites. The late pre-pottery Neolithic going into the sort of standard Neolithic. Now, they found like a whole settlement underwater that goes back to 7,400 BC. Now, this is a bit later, so I believe that it goes even up to this era, up to like 6,000 BC. They were moving around. They were moving out of the Taş Tepeler region when agriculture came in. And they found this like stone circle construction. It's got cut marks. But what is really interesting is they've actually found possible alignments here with the solstices again, like we have here. So they found this where the red lines are. I actually borrowed this. I want to thank Matt Simpson from Ancient Architects. He created this graphic in one of his videos. But this alignment here, although Clive Ruggles, this archaeoastronomer from Britain, for some reason said this was a winter solstice alignment. It's actually a summer solstice alignment. And you can see that the angle there, where their red lines are. And number 56 on the image is actually, the stone circle is actually this, which we looked at. So you've got stone circles, you've got corridors made of stone aligning with the solstices back then. And there's even speculations about, the planisphere of the heavens are encoded in the stones there. So I find this particularly interesting when we're looking at, because I'm in our upcoming book, we're really looking at why this winter solstice thing was so important to them at Karahan Tepe. But now we're finding so much evidence in other areas before and after Karahan Tepe of this kind of thing going on, that they had this obsession with needing to know about the solstices in different times of year. I mean, we even have this Jericho as well.
Wouldn't that only be for like planting crops? I mean,
no,
not only.
It's not
ceremonial.
It's not all about planting crops, because this was before agriculture.
Was it?
Well, officially it was.
Yeah, officially.
But I mean, if we look here, you've got Paleolithic alignments, which we can look at in a moment. But Jericho's another one with the summer solstice sunset alignment. So one of the ideas, this is from anthropologists who studied with, tribes and things like this as well, and looking at these Paleolithic alignments and even early Mesolithic alignments. The solstices were the easiest ones to record because it's the extreme point on the north and south of the horizon, which it's much easier to record than, say, the equinoxes, which goes east twice a year but moves too fast to kind of fix an easy point on it. And I think that's where the kind of key is. It's like the solstices are the key. The equinoxes are kind of useful if you're doing the longer cycles of precession of the equinoxes, where you're looking at where the sun rises in certain constellations over vast periods of time, but not for the annual kind of stuff. It's really the solstices are the key to that. And the reason that's interesting is because we've got places like Lascaux in France, which is 17,000 BC, 19,000 years ago. You've got the Chauvet Caves, again in France. These goes back 32,000 BC, 34,000 years ago. And this is actually, it was actually Martin Sweatman, I want to credit him, who put me onto this. He gave a lecture for Megalithomania at a conference. And he posted this image, which I've kind of adapted, which is from an article by some very, very interesting academics. And what they found is that they found that... actually, what have we got before that? Yeah. They found that the alignments of the cave entrances in Paleolithic caves, where there's paintings at the back of the cave, at certain times of year, like specifically the winter solstice sunrises and the summer solstice sunsets, the light would come in, illuminate the caves enough where you could, all the artwork is illuminated, just enough at the back. So that could have been when they painted them. So they would have the light to paint them. And so that's why they specifically chose caves with certain entrances. And this graphic here shows you the number of decorated caves on these azimuths. The orange is the winter solstice sunrise, and the blue is the summer solstice sunset. Whereas the rest of them are kind of arbitrary. There's not much else. There's no equinox ones really. A couple of them are to the north, things like this. But when they're decorated or painted caves, they align to either the winter solstice sunrise or the summer solstice sunset majorly. And Lascaux especially, that really does. That's the summer solstice sunset. That's the most famous one. So we have to consider that there's something quite profound going on here, even at this early time. And then when you look at it, you realize that perhaps this wasn't about planting crops. This was about choosing the feast days. This was choosing the dates of the ceremonies, choosing the dates of the rituals. There's even this image here. We have the hands. These were found in some of the ones associated with these times of year. And these are kids' hands. So now there's even suggestions that these were kind of initiation rites, like rites of passage, going from one age to the next part of your life, from youngster to a teenager and things like this. And so it could be more ceremonial. It could be more focused on choosing the feast days, choosing the times of initiation. It was useful for hunting because you know when certain animals were migrating. It had its uses as well. And then later it became really important with agriculture, because they could easily kind of work out the times of the year, especially combined with the moon. The moon in between the solar cycles, they could kind of get quite accurate dating. There's lots of these kind of things like this that were found. This goes back to 30,000 BC in France, Abri Blanchard, and this shows you potentially the sequence of circles showing the waxing and the waning moon. So even back then, they were making these observations. And to me, this is really fascinating because it makes sense that the winter solstice alignment at Karahan Tepe may have been a kind of legacy building up, when it was more about choosing the feast days, choosing the dates of the ceremonies and things like this. Then it developed into astronomy and understanding more about the planets, the Milky Way, where Venus rises, and then the moon cycles. And even into like cultures that didn't even need it afterwards, they still focused on the solstices, like at Stonehenge and other places, Newgrange and many other places. So I think the solstices are more important than people realize. They're not just about about growing food or anything like this. There's a whole different element to this.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, to me, to think about the possibilities of what our ancestors were doing and when they were doing it and how they were doing it is just fascinating. Not to so for me, I guess or let me just ask a question or two. The pre-pottery Neolithic people, when were they? What was their time period?
It goes from 9,600 BC up until around I think 8,200 BC or thereabouts, and then the later phase of that goes up to around 7,400 BC or so. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it starts around 9,600 BC. It's generally when Göbekli Tepe really kicked in.
So help me with how our ancestors in 9,000 BC would have been pre-pottery, and yet in 12,000 BC or 13,000 BC, we're seeing hard stone carved objects.
Yes.
Yeah. How is that? And how is it that there's that? Yeah. Let's answer that one first. I've got.
No, it's a good. Yeah, basically that they worked with stone and bone. They were like this. This is bone plug. You know, they definitely did. But stone was their medium. They just did it. That's all that. The thing is, lime plaster and terrazzo, which are made pretty much the same way, were known about before the time of Göbekli Tepe. So they could have created objects with this lime plaster, but instead they just used it to make floors and to cover up, walls or parts of their structures. And that was pretty much it. They didn't really use it for much else. And so that's interesting. I mean, why didn't they could have developed that and started making ceramics with that? I mean, they knew how to heat things up because they had to heat up the terrazzo. To get the terrazzo, they had to go up to 850 degrees Celsius. Anyway, so so they could have done it, but they didn't. They stuck with the stuff. Why that is, I don't know, but I think they just got to a point where they were so good with the stone, they worked out how to do it, and I think it may have been part of their kind of tradition, just slowly working the stone. It was like what they did, how they did it,
But no pottery found prior to that.
Apparently not, no.
Yeah, interesting.
It's pre-pottery Neolithic.
Yeah,
it's before the time.
Right. But the Taşka site, potentially with the images of I thought it was a combination of pottery and hard stone from 12-ish thousand years ago, but that's pre-pottery Neolithic, right?
That is the era, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but they may have been experimenting with it there, but I don't know. As far as I'm aware, I think it must have been made of stone. Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Much like you have with these objects here.
Yeah, it's just incredible that they could be working that stone like that and creating those objects that are almost perfectly round, that were clearly turned on something, that they could create that they could create something like Göbekli Tepe and all these sites in Taş Tepeler, but that they couldn't plant a crop, and that the winter solstice and the summer solstice weren't used as guides for planting. It seems like a disconnect.
It is interesting, but I think they were. It became that, when it became a kind of, it was needed, but it seems like it wasn't for that purpose originally, which I think is fascinating, because it makes you question their whole kind of mindset, what they were thinking. But there is evidence of agriculture long before the standard kind of dates were given of 9,000 BC or so. There are stuff going on down in Syria, down in Israel with the Natufians again. They were experimenting with growing food in a kind of almost like proto-agriculture. They were growing things, they were cultivating certain things, starting to domesticate some animals, but then they would move around to different areas. They wouldn't stay in one place. They'd be semi-nomadic or semi-sedentary, and could go to one place in a different time of year, go and stay in that place, or then come back to another place. There's even evidence of some dates going back 23,000 years, I think, at a certain site not far in Israel, next to in the northern area of Israel. 23,000 years where they started experimenting with stuff, but it seems like that's a one-off. I mean, that is a very strange thing. But so I think there's been experiments with that over the millennia.
Mm-hmm. Okay, take me back. Double click on this boat. This boat that what are the details there?
The details of the Cyprus boat, I don't have details of it yet. I haven't started researching it yet, but I quickly read it, I think in Graham's article, and I kind of had a quick look at it, and it was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because, if they're apparently they were moving quite a lot of people back and forth. They weren't small boats. It was like they were quite big, and they were doing it effectively more than once. So I need to do a bit more research on that, but for sure that was happening. And I think this is one of the revelations which is now coming out. And that kind of puts a whole different spin on diffusionism, which is going to really annoy the archaeologists, because if they were able to create such boats like this back then, then people could move around much more freely than, people realize.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah, Graham and I speculated a little bit about the possibility of ancient humans around the same time period as we're using boats on the other side of the world, actually using boats during the Ice Age to come from Australia, Papua New Guinea, through an island chain that would have existed at the time, with sea levels 400 feet lower and more ice on the poles pushing the equator up into the, so that more underground was exposed. It creates this almost perfect line from essentially west all the way to those areas. Yeah, there it is. This is east between Peru. And right where that hits Peru, if you follow that little hockey stick up to the top right, there Graham showed, and Ryan's going left. But if you follow it to the top right there, there's this carving on a hill that's basically like this big. It's almost like a trident, and it shows like, okay, you're here. This is it, and it looks as if that hockey stick for me, it's almost like. That was intentionally bringing you there, and then you're hopping along all of these islands, coming from the west, going to the east, going from the east, going to the west. But you're able to navigate much more easily across the Pacific Ocean through these what would have been islands above water. You're able to stop. You're able to repair your boats. You stop for food. You stop for rest. You stop to avoid storms, whatever it might be. But that could make a lot more sense as a way to get from. And there's DNA evidence as well from in South America. There's a lot of DNA evidence from like Aborigine people and people from Australia that would suggest that, hey, this is a possibility that people were using boats during the Ice Age and making this cross past Easter Island, which of course has walls that look exactly like they look in Peru. Could those be much older, and could this, as opposed to going in across a land bridge through frozen tundra, and somehow not getting frostbite up there during the Ice Age, could this have made a little bit more sense as a way for people to have populated South America? And South America was much more populated than North America back then. So it's I thought it was pretty compelling speculation.
Yeah, no, I watched the recent episodes that covered that as well of Ancient Apocalypse, and it's compelling, for sure. And I think that kind of could be applied anywhere really around the world. You think about it, moving along the coasts, even on rafts, is much more efficient than going up mountains and walking on beaches and things like that. And you know where you're going. If you've got like little guides along the coasts, little island chains and things like that. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
I think so too. And especially to hear you talk about boats being used on the other side of the world during the Ice Age.
Well, you just brought up Graham's article there. I mean, maybe we could have a look at that. And it actually has, I think it has the boats from Cyprus mentioned in that as well. Because that is just, I think that's a big breakthrough, personally. And also it could be used along the rivers as well, along the Tigris, along the Euphrates, and things like this. I mean, there was very much a big thing in Egypt, ancient Egypt, when they found the massive, beautiful boats next to the Great Pyramid, literally just there, just buried right there. So they, a few thousand years later, mind you, but still, I mean, that is pretty epic for its time. Yeah, I'm glad he did this, actually. It's a really, really good summary of kind of, setting the standard about what was going on before Göbekli Tepe. I think it was really important that this came out kind of thing, and this is going to be part in the new edition, I think, of Magicians of the Gods. We'll actually go into some other things here which we can talk about, where, about the questioning the roof hypothesis at Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, and how the archaeologists say, well, there were definitely roofs, even though there's not really any evidence for them. And yet, because of that means there's no astronomy at the sites whatsoever.
Right.
So that just gets removed from the kind of everything, and that is kind of frustrating for me, especially.
Why do you think they do that? Just to have less to worry about, or what do you think why would you just exclude that possibility from the realm of possibilities?
It could be because people like me and Andrew Collins and Graham and others come up with these astronomical theories or astrological theories, solstice theories about these sites. And they don't like it. They don't like other people doing it so much. But there's not. I mean, the the most fundamental, clear alignment is the Karahan Tepe winter solstice, because you can go there. You can go there this December and see it happen. There's no question it's happening. And it's happening now. It would have happened. It would have looked even better, 10,000, 11,000 years ago. But I think there's a fundamental thing. Even Klaus Schmidt didn't really get into the astronomy side of things when he was there. So he didn't really find any obvious alignments or any obvious symbolism. But now with the work of Martin Sweatman and Graham and Andrew Collins and J.J. Ainsworth and others, it's unquestionable now. It really is unquestionable.
Yeah, it's a shame that they wouldn't just want that to be a part of the research and just be open to that being a possibility and just say, well, I don't know, and let's have other smart people look at it.
Yeah, I got a few graphics I can show you in a little while for sure, but I think he wants to show us this is the boat thing, yeah?
Okay.
Is this the bit? Yeah, here we go. Yeah, 12,000 years ago, and they were going between, like I said, they were going between the Anatolia and Cyprus, several times per year in order to transport large ruminants like weaned calves or small wild boar. Wild boar, amazing, because you get the wild boar symbolism at Göbekli Tepe as well. I mean, that is absolutely fascinating. Oh my God. Oh. That is very cool. Okay, Matt, you're going to have to
That's cool.
make one of these now. Do some tests.
Right. That's where I stop.
yeah. See if you can get from here to Anatolia.
No. You'll never hear from me again.
Oh, right. So this shows you the different routes as well. Yeah, I mean, this is fascinating. I mean, I think this is kind of it's going to be one of the big stories coming out, kind of waking people up that there's a level of sophistication and coastal areas as well, and next to river kind of areas as well, which are going to kind of make this much more interesting to look at.
So what about the Sphinx? What dates? Would you say that is a part of this ancient super civilization, or do you think that was built much after?
It could be. I mean, quite possibly. I mean, traditionally it's built at the time, the Fourth Dynasty is part of that whole culture, who built the pyramids on the Giza Plateau. Obviously, we've got people like John Anthony West and Graham and others who claim it's much older, 10,500 BC. This is because of its orientation to the east, and then in the night sky at that time when the sun rises on the equinox, you will get Leo rising as well. And so it's thought that quite possibly that's the orientation of that. Now, I've actually got an image here, funnily enough, excuse me, of a possible alignment that comes out from Karahan Tepe. And the stellarium image in the background there is looking east. Now, we believe that there's actually a small channel. Where that arrow is, we believe there might be a channel partly carved out through the site looking east. So it may be an equinox alignment. We're not sure because it's still got rubble on it, but where the very edge of the pillar shrine or structure AB, there is definitely a kind of channel at that part of it. So we think there's something going on there. And the reason why this connects with the Sphinx is because looking east, even at 9,400 BC, which is the oldest date for Karahan Tepe, we have Leo rising again with the sun, around the time of the sunrise. So this, or just before the sunrise or next to it. And so this again could be the same sort of symbology we're seeing on the Giza Plateau. However, in that case, we don't think that they saw Leo as a lion. We thought, I believe that they saw Leo as a leopard. The reason being is because there's a lot of leopard carvings, a predominant amount at Göbekli Tepe, and it's very much so at Karahan Tepe. And I think that's really kind of relevant. And even this image here, this one on the right, he's holding a head in his hand, and always kind of paws, this leopard figure, possibly a fox, but possibly a leopard. There's also other leopard carvings that we discovered on the sides of some of the upright bedrock pillars. And this is kind of, this is like the symbol, really, the one on the right of Karahan Tepe. It's really quite amazing. This was found in the main enclosure, kind of facing east.
Wow.
And so, it's speculation, but it may be connected with the winter solstice because if you got the spring equinox, and we believe, myself and J.J. Ainsworth very much believe that the winter solstice sunrise is a kind of part of a fertility drama played out over the year, where and this has been talked about at sites like Newgrange, even at Stonehenge, by other authors like Aubrey Beall, Terence Meaden, and others, who suggest that the shadows of like the stones at Stonehenge, of the heel stone on the summer solstice sunrise, would penetrate through the kind of feminine portal into the site, one of the trilithons. Likewise, at Newgrange, it's like the male shard of light penetrating through the passageway, like the female part, and going into the chamber, illuminating this womb-like area. And the same principle can be applied with the pillar shrine, and the light coming through, the male shard of light coming through the hold stone, the female stone, going into the womb-like chamber with phalluses there, possibly with water in it. And so there could be a suggestion that on the equinox, which is 9 months before, spring equinox is 9 months before the winter solstice, there may have been possibly, sexual rites taking place. And then they would give birth around the time of the winter solstice to sort of play out this drama, through the natural cycles of the earth. So they would have to mark these periods of time at the site, which they may have done on both these times of year. Now this, again, we need more data, we need more discoveries to kind of back this up, but it fits in with other kind of cultures, from the Neolithic era in Britain and other places. And also the fact you've got a possible leopard as Leo is really, really interesting. And even in Egypt, you have the leopard skin is represented, this is JJ's work. She's done work on Sheshat, who's the consort or wife of Thoth or Tahuti, she was like a master surveyor. She was like a master, and Thoth was the scribe of writing and things like this and knowledge. But Sheshat was actually all about surveying and measuring, which we're finding at these sites as well. So the leopard was associated with that, in Egyptian tradition. So there's all these little correlations that we keep finding, which make it a really interesting area of study.
Wow. Yeah, I'd never heard the leopard possibility for the Sphinx before. That's really interesting.
I mean, that is wild speculation. Yeah. But it's a nice idea because there's so many symbols,
right?
And there's different ideas for the same. I mean, Robert Temple's written about it being Anubis, like a kind of jackal dog thing, and there's no real evidence it's a lion as such. The way its back is actually more like an Anubis kind of jackal dog thing. It's like, it looks more like that than it does a kind of feline. So the debate's open on that one, but it's a possibility. I mean, they're all possibilities.
Yeah, and Leo, the constellation could have easily been a leopard too, I guess, right? Why not?
Well, the first three letters of leopard is Leo, so I think that's pretty tight.
Yeah. Confirmed. Yep. So what's new happening at Göbekli Tepe specifically, if anything?
Well, they're doing a bit more excavation there, not much, but a little bit. They've been working on Enclosure B, but a paper was published which had some discoveries from Enclosure D, which I thought was really interesting. And on the left here, there's an image of a stone, probably a couple of feet across, placed in a very specific position within the enclosure, which is to the southeast. And that really got me because that is exactly, the placement of that is exactly where the winter solstice sunrise would be in 9600 BC. You can see that here. Number 7 on the bottom right there. And then what I found was, if you look at if we just jump back to that one again, on the left of the image on the left, you have like a kind of C, like a sharp C with corners on it. And on the other side, it's like a kind of curved C backwards with the H in the middle. Now the H is all over the site. You can see it here. It's on the belts. It's on different pillars. It's on different areas. And now there's an association with the outer wall as well, very much so, where it's placed. And notice that C on the left, the sharp C, almost like a turned over V. That is, I thought, was really odd, because usually they're curved Cs you get on the belts and everything. But this one is particularly sharp corner. And then I noticed that if you place that, just chuck that in the middle of Enclosure D.
So 7 is where that stone is down there on the bottom right?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
okay.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. So that kind of turned over V or C is the same pretty much the same orientation. The difference between the summer solstice sunrise, where we've got P30, pillar 30 up there, and the winter solstice sunrise on number 7 in 9600 BC. So I thought that was quite intriguing because the pillar 30 as well has got a hole in it. It's got H's on it, turned the other way, almost like an I, H turned on its side. So it could represent the 2 different times of the year. The H could represent the winter solstice, upright, turned over H, the summer solstice. Again, we're speculating here. There's lots of different interpretations of this. But Martin Sweatman's written a paper about the meaning of the H, and I think that's really interesting. And it could be, a simple thing. This is the view from in between the pillars looking in that direction. And, you got people standing up there. That's because they put this walkway in. Without the walkway there, you can see the horizon. Yeah, one of the only areas you can see the horizon perfectly, looking towards that H stone, which is in the wall down there at the far back, still covered up partly there. And then that looks like an H to me. 2 pillars and the horizon going across, it's like an H in a simplistic form. And Martin Sweatman did discuss this on his Prehistory Decoded blog, which is very interesting. But again, the only reason I was looking for, as soon as I noticed the location of that stone, I knew it was the winter solstice, just knew it. So I checked it, got the exact right alignment, and it is that. It's on it. I mean, it could be a massive just coincidence. It might be. So I don't want to we're going to look into that a bit more.
Yeah, it's worth exploring.
Yeah, but we think the H symbol has other meanings as well. This is something JJ's looking into, where it's like it could almost represent a kind of portal or a kind of way into something. In other parts of the site, on these big pillars here, we have them in belts. We also have them, on tops of pillars turned over. We have selection of them on pillar 43. There's even some being found on the ground. There's actually an H carved on the ground where number 8 is as well. Just very rough kind of, like incision on the ground there. So for some reason, that was one of their symbols. And it's difficult to know exactly what it means, but I think it's compelling nonetheless. And in the area towards the north, where this boar statue has been found, you can see that on the left there. And also there's a fallen kind of T-pillar on its side. It's almost like holding up the wall, which was discovered late last year. But this boar statue is, funnily enough, it relates to the winter solstice. It's actually a winter solstice symbol, which we'll look at in a moment. But we have a scan of it here, and you can see in the mouth, this is like life-size boar. This is wild boar, and we saw that mentioned as well on the Cyprus boats. They were bringing wild boars to and from Anatolia, from Cyprus and back and forth, which is interesting. Whether it was just for meat or whether it has some sacred ritual purpose. You can see the spine going up the back, but what you can see is that it's got red, white, and black pigment has been found on it, which is really, really intriguing, because this could then suggest that the entire site had red, white, and black pigment on it, maybe other colours. So it would be quite weirdly colourful. And there's actually a couple of pillars, I think one from Taş Tepe or Karahan Tepe, where it looks like it's been partly painted red, the top part of the pillar, but it may just be the photo was a bit weird or something. But they found it in other parts of Göbekli Tepe as well. And so there could have been a very colourful site. Maybe those 3 colours, maybe more colours, but for sure those 3 colours, because all 3 have been found on this particular boar statue. And there are many boar statues. This is actually from a paper by Lee Clare, which is a public online paper you can read, looking at the new discoveries from Göbekli Tepe. Most of these have been discovered some time ago, but there's lots of boars, especially in Enclosure C, but some in Enclosure D as well. It's a very prominent symbol found all across the site. And must also remember that the boar, Adonis, was killed by a boar, and sacrifices of boars at midwinter were a kind of thing in some ancient traditions. This is kind of a thing that happened. We actually have this slide here. This is actually my friend Andrew Collins showed me this. So you get the sacrifice of the boar at the midwinter to avenge the boar's actions, but this is an assurance of the return of the god in spring, in the spring equinox. So we've got it going the other way now, from the winter to the spring. Then the other way I looked at it, from the spring, the kind of sexual rites, to the winter solstice. So the same story of a god of rebirth killed by a boar, Adonis, Attis, Osiris, and so forth. And so we have this association, with this possible discovery of this winter solstice alignment. We have the boar is related to the winter solstice as well. And it's the most prominent part of the enclosure, really. It's the most prominent statue there, which I think is compelling, to say the least. It may, again, we're kind of looking at myths and astro myths to try and understand it. But, we think we're onto something.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff. There's several questions for you. So the paint, why wouldn't the whole thing have been painted? If you're going through the trouble of carving out a mountain and flattening bedrock and, putting in, why wouldn't you paint it? It makes total sense that you would. Is that almost like that's the shoulders that are coming up the side of that boar. The H, when you showed the H, the first thing that I thought of was the H blocks in Bolivia.
Yes, they have been compared to those at Pumapunku. Yeah, there's a lot of weird similarities over there. I have to admit. I think several people. I wrote about this 10 years ago. I published an article on Graham Hancock's website because I travelled to both in that year, like 2013, 2014, and was just like, what the hell is going on here? There's these bizarre similarities, not just in the H symbols, but also in some of the relief carvings. You have this as well, Silustani and Cotimbo, especially in Peru, which are the Chilpa towers of the Coya people, which are pre-Inca. And also at Tiwanaku, again, which is pre-Inca in Bolivia, modern-day Bolivia, around Lake Titicaca. There's also a site called Pucara as well, which is very interesting. And that is, again, that's a Tiwanaku-era site. And that has large T-shaped pillars, pretty much. They're very decorated and weirdly and kind of adjusted. I'll provide an image of that so you can have a look. They're very, very interesting. And so, there are weird similarities that you get with Peru and Bolivia, which have been documented over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it makes sense if there's anything to this speculation of this ice age. You're talking about a super civilization on this side of the world. If there's any truth to Graham's speculation and other people's speculation about potentially traveling by boat through that island chain to Peru, it would be the same time period. You're talking about the same time period where you've got H's showing up in Göbekli Tepe on one side of the world and H blocks showing up. If there's truth to this speculation, where because you do have these walls on Easter Island that are exactly the same as the walls on Peru, that is a very short drive from Bolivia. Could be something there.
There is. It's the same thing as well. You look at, there are sites in Turkey which are Hittite sites and Hattian sites, the two early sort of Bronze Age cultures of polygonal walls with jigsaw blocks, puffy polygonal kind of cushion-like blocks all together, and just like you get in Cuzco or Sacsayhuaman. And so that's odd. How do you explain that? It's much later than Göbekli Tepe, but it's definitely, very, very similar. And why did they come up with the same stuff? Here we have Hattusa, This is Hattusa. This is like the Lion Gate. So there's a site called Alachahoyak as well nearby. And again, you have the kind of feline symbolism here as well, which may have... And also the Luwian script of the Hittites is something that my partner JJ's looked at, and also Robert Schock and a couple of other people, where a lot of the symbols of the Luwian script, which is the Bronze Age script, are represented at Göbekli Tepe. And so it may have been a memory of this very early epoch.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, I think we covered it, man. What else is there to get into?
Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities. There's so much going on. One of the things you've got to consider when it comes to southeast Turkey is the fact that this is happening now. This is literally happening as we speak. Is right now, this minute. Digs are taking place at all these different sites, and you've got to remember, most of these sites were buried deeply under the ground, several feet, up to 20, 30 feet down, even more in some cases. And, it's like going back in time to like the time, of the discoveries being made in Egypt a couple of 100 years ago, or in the jungles of Central, South America, North America, and everything else, where you're finding all these pyramids and other such things, and you're making the discoveries there and then, like these great explorers. And so this is happening in southeast Turkey. You go over there now over the next few years, and you're going to see this. This is actually happening. And so, to me, that's mind-blowing. Mm-hmm. To live in this era where this is happening right in your face, this is happening right now, only just been discovered, really, in relative terms. And you can go and see it for yourself. You can go to the winter solstice, watch the sunrise at Karahan Tepe, and see the face get illuminated, if they'll let you in, but they might not. And so this, you can actually witness, history in the making. And I think that's what's so compelling.
It's cool
about about this area of study. And now it's making everyone question other sites around the world. Were there other sites of this era that maybe you need to redate some sites just to check? Because I know there's quite a few sites that had anomalous, very ancient dates associated with them, which didn't make sense, so they kind of got ignored, like the carbon dating. And now maybe we need to relook at some of those, because civilization could be, clearly is now pushed back much, much further than previously realized.
Stuff just keeps getting older.
Stuff just keeps getting older, for sure.
What are some of those sites then?
Well, there's lots of possibilities. I mean, even at Stonehenge, I think is an interesting example.
Right.
We have to consider that. I mean, I've got a couple of images here, this is really interesting. I think we mentioned this before, but here we have like Stonehenge, a bunch of people, a bunch of my buddies in there probably, and there's the stone circle itself is officially no older than 3000 BC. And that's fair enough. The blue stones came in first. The smaller stones, they come from Wales. There's the big sarsen stones. They come from, 20 miles away or so. But there's these giant post holes that were found. But for a long time, they were blobs of paint in the car park. And for a long period of time, they were there before Stonehenge was ever built. These date back to 10,000 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just 5,000 years older than Stonehenge, but in the same place. They're like 40 yards away from Stonehenge Stone Circle. And yet they were just blobs of paint in the car park. They did all the archaeology on it. Archaeologist called Newman, and they... very deep, very wide, like 3 feet wide, some of them, and they were thought to hold these giant pine posts. And they worked out the height could be up to 30 feet, maybe even more, because of the nature of the size of the holes they were in. And the ash, the remnants of they know they were pine because they found burnt pine at the bottom of them. So they could have been giant totem poles. They're virtually east-west as well. And you can see that here. But then some research was done by a gentleman called Newman, back in 1966, and he noted, this is the image on the right here, he noted that the orientation of them, if you were to stand in an imaginary Stonehenge, because it wasn't built yet, although there could have been, there's good evidence now that there was one of the stones of Stonehenge was there from a very early epoch. It may have been a natural erratic just found at the site. May have even just naturally formed there. They found that if you're looking at these post holes from the center of the circle back 10,000 years ago, it's going to mark the extreme positions of the moon, on the north, I think it's along the north and south part of the horizon. And so that was really interesting, and quite possibly some other alignments as well. Then the image on the left, then it was later worked out.
Is that on the 18-year moon cycle then?
18.6-year moon cycle, the Metonic moon cycle.
Okay, that's pretty impressive.
But they're not sure if that's why they were placed there.
Right, but it happens to line up with the center of Stonehenge.
Yes. And then Stonehenge was built there later.
Or was it? Or was it already there?
There might be. There's probably something there. I mean, this was a special place for a long time, There's a Mesolithic settlement in this area. In fact, this is where I live virtually. And so this Amesbury, the village, or the small town next door to Stonehenge, is the longest continually inhabited settlement in Britain by far. It's definitely 10,000 years old or more. There's a place called Blickmead just down the road from me, and it's an ancient flint producing space area. People lived there. The spring with the algae in it produces like pink rocks, which is very bizarre. You can actually see them in the local kind of history centre. But anyway, later, when Stonehenge was built, and some of the first stones put in place were the outer ring of blue stones and the 4 station stones, which form this rectangle you can see in blue. And the angles between, if you follow each line, dark blue line, they mark the different winter solstices, winter solstice sunset, summer solstice sunrise. The short lengths do, but the long lengths match the extremes of the moon, the different extremes of the moon over the 18.6 year cycle. So they were doing that 10,000 years ago, potentially, and they were doing that, building it into the site. And the weird thing is, you've got basically the summer solstice and winter solstice alignments are the short lengths of the rectangle, and the moons are the long lengths, and it perfectly forms a rectangle, a Pythagorean 5, 12, 13. Yeah, 5, 12, 13. If you divide it down the middle, it's a 5, 12, 13 Pythagorean triangle,
Wow.
2 triangles on top of each other. And if you were to go 10 miles north or 10 miles south, that rectangle would warp to get the same alignments. So the position, they knew somehow 10,000 years ago, this was the right latitude to do their readings. And then 5,000 years later, they then built it into the Stonehenge that you see today. And so little things like that, it's hard to explain. But I think, something's going on. And it's not just there. I mean, there's other examples where they were doing this at this early stage.
Yeah.
But just the fact you've got it there, I think is really interesting. And so, to me, there's a good chance, very speculative chance, that the people of Göbekli Tepe, who were starting to measure the Earth, I think after the end of the last ice age, when chaos had occurred, they were going around the world. They were like wanting to survey the planet again, and they would travel far and wide, possibly in boats now from Cyprus, possibly even go to Europe. Then it would have been Doggerland, joining up with Europe, so they could have even walked there. It would have taken a while, but possibly go around the coast in boats. They were marking different latitudes to take their readings to measure the Earth. That's how they got all these Earth measurements, encoded within Göbekli Tepe. And so then you have all the stories of Enoch and Book of Enoch taking cords, going to measure, and all this kind of stuff. That starts to make sense now. But not just that, they went further north, even in this early epoch, right up to the top of where they could get to, where there was no ice, to a site called Warren Field in Aberdeenshire. This is spectacular. Again, these are large, giant wooden post holes, giant ones, bigger than the ones in Stonehenge. This, again, dates back to 8,000 BC, the same era as the post holes of Stonehenge. And this could be potentially the oldest calendar, although now that's been challenged because Martin Sweatman's theory of a Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe calendar and our winter solstice discovery may dispute that. But this is kind of, this is like before it was excavated, this came up in the crop marks from a dry summer in 1976. So there's 12 pits that have been identified, and they think it was created to imitate the phases of the moon, to track the lunar months, reaching its extreme points to the left and right, as you can see on this picture here. But also, guess what? The winter solstice sunrise as well. That's the main thing that would rise between the gap between the mountains. So this was happening in Britain, at this time, and they were trying to get as far north as they could, I believe, because they wanted to, they were using this also to try and make measurements of surveying as well. So it gets really weird when you start getting into this. This can be expanded. There's other places. We've seen the Paleolithic sites that are aligned. We've seen these sites in Britain. We're seeing the sites in southeast Turkey. There's probably many others. as well that could go back to this era. They just haven't been discovered yet. And so to me, these are all indicators of using astronomy for surveying and other purposes. And, you know, this, I mean, even like we have the sites of Malta. There's a big debate about these, that they go back to a much earlier epoch. We have Lenny Regic. She actually appeared on the first season of Ancient Apocalypse with Graham. She spoke at our conference several years ago. She's got this amazing book out. And she believes through studying the movement of Sirius, she's worked out that the sites on Malta could go back to the same era as Göbekli Tepe, or even earlier in some cases. And they also all align to the solstices, equinoxes, and winter solstices and everything else perfectly. Even with a roof, they work with the roof. It all comes through just above the horizon, just like it would at Karahan Tepe. So it just gets weirder and weirder.
It gets weirder and weirder.
Yeah.
And so you've got people in Malta and in Turkey and in England and potentially in South America and potentially in other parts of the world that are all doing the exact same thing at the exact same time. They're measuring the solstice, they're measuring the equinoxes, and they're measuring the cycles of the moon through very similar structures, all at the exact same time. I mean,
pretty much
within a reasonable range.
Yes, yeah. So this is the case we're building. That there was something profound going on at this time.
That there was a civilization. That, I mean, that's not like pockets of hunter gatherers just kind of randomly, arbitrarily doing this, right? You're talking about a civilization, potentially global.
That's our argument. We don't know about all full global, but certainly there seems to be a connection through this part of Anatolia going into Europe. And it was all joined together, remember? This was all Doggerland era where England, Britain joined to Europe. So there was potential routeways that the people would just migrate across, and they would do these things. I mean, and then when the weather improved, you know, it took a little while for it to improve further in Britain. They were able to get up to this site like in Aberdeenshire, which is very northern Scotland. You know, and there's a good chance, even on Orkney, we're going to find stuff of this kind of age, I think, as well. I think there's some reference to these ages even up there. Because you need to get, it's all about, if you're doing a survey, you've got to get all the latitudes. You've got to go as far north as you can. And the most northerly point in anywhere you could go was in Britain because of the Gulf Stream,
right? Kept it warm.
Yeah,
up there.
yeah, and so you were able to get further north there than anywhere else. And so then you got the grooved ware people who emerged up there as well in Orkney, then spread out through Europe and Britain, who are sophisticated people. Again, doing the astronomy, doing the stonework, doing the measurements, and everything else.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, it's incredible to think about how connected the people were back then and what they were doing and how they were organized and, you know, how they, it's incredible. It's incredible.
It's just delightful that you're actually able to get evidence of it as well.
Right.
I mean, like the Warrenfield thing in Aberdeenshire or the post holes, Stonehenge, because they could easily get lost and forever be gone. You know, that's why I believe there's a lot more to be discovered. I mean, just imagine what's under the North Sea and Doggerland.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there could be a number of things there.
No doubt.
And all the, the amount of flooding that's taken place. We were talking about Atlit Yam, weren't we, earlier, next to Israel, which has been flooded so much that it's now, several hundred meters under sea level. So that's what we're dealing with, hundreds of feet of sea level, change. And so there could be a whole world of discovery to be made.
Yeah, fascinating. All right, well, what did we miss?
Not much.
Yeah, I don't think so between the two.
I think we ploughed through quite a bit there.
Yeah.
I mean, we go into a few other things, but we talked about that last time, the metrology and the geometry.
We did, yeah.
So we don't need to repeat that. But I think it's just a worthy study, this part of the world. And I'm delighted to have that opportunity and time to do it and have the opportunities to go out there, meet the families who own the land, get to know what's happening, be there when discoveries are being made, make our own little discoveries as well. It's very, very, very nice. Feel very honoured to be living in this time and witnessing this happen.
Yeah, for sure. What are you most excited about in the next couple of years?
Well, just what is happening out in Taş Tepeler land.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just we're just waiting.
Yeah.
We're just sitting around waiting. Come on, hurry up! You know, we want to see stuff.
Right.
And so we're just getting excited by that, and we think there's going to be some announcements, you know, coming out before the end of the year. Mm-hmm. So there's a big congress happening. They're going to probably prepare things for that. So watch out for that. It could be a very special winter solstice for more reasons than one.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Interesting. If you could dig anywhere in the world other than the places that we've talked about today, if you could explore some place, where would you go?
I think it has to be. I think you've got to look at Doggerland again.
Yeah.
I think that's a weird one. That's a good one. I mean, there's going to be stone circles and megaliths, all sorts of things there. One of the areas I want to go, which I'm desperate to go to, which will happen, I hope, in my lifetime, is I'm fascinated by the Pacific. You know, the Micronesia and places like this, South Pacific as well. I managed to go to Tonga once. I've been at Easter Island, but she's going back there next year, fortunately. But there's lots of places in the Pacific. I've got very influenced in my early researches by David Hatcher Childress. I was a big fan of his, and he did a lot of traveling and a lot of books about that area. A lot of places like Namadol, Yam, a few other places, the Marquesas Islands and other such things. That I'm interested in because I think there's something profound going on in that area, but no one's that interested. It's not really. I mean, it gets featured on a few TV shows here and there, Ancient Aliens and other places.
Right.
But really, this is not really that well researched. And I had a friend of mine, Stuart Mason, who's an archaeoastronomer, and he was living in Fiji for a couple of years. He lived out there for a couple of years. Recently, this was before he moved to Australia. Now he's back in England. But he was living, and he discovered like massive megalithic platforms. Almost like step pyramids, really low step pyramids, like you find on Tonga, like the Langi platforms you find on Tonga. But he found them in Fiji and never documented. No one had documented them before. So that whole area there is ripe for kind of research and discovery. And again, the flooding, what's underneath the water there is probably equally interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fascinating. Hey, cool, man. Well, how can people follow you and keep up with your work?
Yeah, they can they can find me, Hugh Newman, anywhere online, that kind of thing. We've got the megalithomania.co.uk website, also the Megalithomania UK YouTube channel, where we have lots of stuff on there, lots of explorations and lectures and everything else. We run a couple of conferences. We run the Megalithomania conference every May, pretty much. It's a big sort of 6-day event with tours and everything. And then we do the Origins conference in November in Wiltshire. And we take groups out to Turkey and other places regularly every May and September and other areas around the world, because we are, myself and JJ, and we work with Andrew Collins and Jim Vieira and others. We all want to explore. It's like, we've got this lifetime to do this. Let's not mess around. Let's go see what these places are all about. Let's take people out there. We can have a good time, and we often make little discoveries on our little group tours. We make little, because sometimes they got better eyesight than us,
Right,
or
right.
they have it's an insight we didn't see, and so you actually having extra pairs of eyes. It's really beneficial. It makes the research more compelling. You find little things and little ideas develop, in a group situation, and we find that really cool. Find that really important.
Mm-hmm. They're going to keep letting you come back to the sites?
I pray. I hope so. Yeah. I do hope so. We're in Turkey. We're very sensible. We're very respectful. We're not going to do anything to cause any problems or anything, obviously. And we really want to, we one of our roles we feel is to open this up to people, get people going there, talking about it and visiting, because it helps their economy as well. It helps everybody in the end. So it's like it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't find anything really controversial about anything that you've said, that you've gone over. I mean, there's nothing that's threatening to anybody or to a mainstream.
Tell me about it.
Yeah,
I believe you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's very pragmatic and logical, the approach that you take. I mean, nothing's extreme. Nothing's just going out on a limb, you're simply talking about some astronomical alignments that, you know, may have existed, and I don't understand why that could be a threat or why that is looked down upon at all.
That's a good point. Yeah, nor do I. I mean, but I don't know. I mean, basically, I think I've personally reached a point, several of my friends and colleagues have, is that we're just going to crack on now.
Yeah.
We're going to write about it. We're going to make videos. We don't feel like we're saying anything super outrageous against the grain or anything. We have a few weird ideas we like to throw into the mix because it kind of fits in with other cultures. A lot of speculation, but then again, archaeology is 90% speculation. You know, really, that was actually a quote by Ed Barnhart on the recent series of Ancient Apocalypse, where he said even his job, a lot of it is guesswork. We're making educated guesses here, trying to interpret things, trying to put things out there. And I feel quite strongly that it needs to be a multidisciplinary approach to interpretation, not necessarily to the digging of the sites or the scanning of the sites or the work that's done at professional quality archaeologists do that for sure. Yeah. When it comes to interpretation, we need to bring in, I think, different disciplines. You've got to do that. I mean, this is why we set up our conference, Megalithomania. We set it up specifically. That was our intention when we set it up. For those that are obsessed by megaliths, you know, they're megalithomaniacs. This is the title of a John Michel book from 1982. Who kind of founded it with us. But also to create a stage for alternative researchers and academics and archaeologists to all be on the same stage and have an open discussion about things in a very polite manner. That was why we set up the conference. This is back in 2006 when we came up with this plan. Myself and John Martineau and Gareth Mills, must give them credit. And we stand by that at our conference. Even on our tours when we do lectures, we're always referencing and talking about the academic research that's been done. And it seems to have just taken a turn recently where there's a lack of respect and understanding between these two different kind of sects almost. It's quite strange, and I think that it needs to be addressed, and I think there needs to be a more of an open discussion and more of an acceptance from academics and archaeologists of ideas. I mean, archaeoastronomy is not that big a deal. That is an accepted science nowadays, has been for decades, so it's not a big deal really, especially that one. But also just there are going to be popular authors, there are going to be popular YouTubers, there are going to be like TV shows that aren't based on entirely academic stuff, and that has to be accepted. And likewise, those that are doing that kind of thing need to maybe give a bit more credence and respect to the hard work of the archaeologists and the academics who are putting in all the background work, but not getting the popularity. Yep. So there's a balance to be found. But I think, first of all, everyone needs to listen to everyone.
Right.
I think that's where it all comes.
Yeah, stay open-minded, right? I mean, don't get too dogmatic, too identified with any belief about history. I mean, you know, and then let's stay open and we can all learn from each other.
Yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely. I mean, the academic stuff. I mean, to me, most of my stuff I've been talking about, a lot of that is academics making discoveries, like at Stonehenge, like at Warren Field in Aberdeenshire, like at Karahan Tepe. So we're not disputing it. We're just kind of, talking about it and giving some other ideas. Because, like JJ, for instance, absolute genius when it comes to mythology and like symbolism. Whereas maybe archaeologists aren't trained in that. Whereas she kind of has spent decades focused on that, and her knowledge of that is unsurpassed. And so that's the point I'm getting at. I think there needs to be a nice little bridge between these worlds.
Right. Yeah, we have to stop looking at people like JJ as a threat and start looking at them as someone who can help, expand our understanding of things. So, yeah, it's difficult when it's you want to be the controller of the knowledge and the controller of the truth and the story and the narrative, and it holds us back. And it's not just in this world; it's across the entire human population. So it's an issue. It's a humanity issue as opposed to a science or archaeologist issue, really. But, well, I really appreciate you coming on, man. It's been great to meet you in person. We had the virtual one, but to get you into the studio and chat with you has been extra special, and a lot of new stuff that you brought even from a couple of months ago when we chatted. So really appreciate your time, your insight, your work, your curiosity, your open mind. It's very much a breath of fresh air. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Yep. Awesome. We'll do it again.
Yeah.
All right, cool.